where never again often seems like an empty promise, and our lives are being upended by a global pandemic. And anti-Semitism, racism, and xenophobia are writ large in the news on a daily basis. It's easy as individuals to feel overwhelmed, to feel helpless and hopeless. What can we, as mere individuals, do to change the course of history? The Diary of Anne Frank, on the other hand, reminds us of the power of a single lone individual, and a young girl at that, to change history, and the centrality of hope against all odds. And it is for this reason that I am so excited for Opera in the Pines to be performing The Diary of Anne Frank on stage at the Maine Jewish Museum, and why Anne's story is as relevant today as it was in the wake of the Holocaust.
There's an expression that's used around Holocaust Remembrance Day. Some people say always remember or never forget. And so how do we accomplish that feature of never forgetting? And it really hit home for me because when I was about Anne Frank's age, the movie came out. And before that, I had gone to and was still, the rest of my time in education was in Jewish school. And there, it was not long after the war, and there were a lot of people who had tattoos of numbers on their arms. So I would ask them about them, and they didn't want to talk about it. They had just gone through it, and it was very, very emotional. And one day, one of the men said to me, "Look at this food that they're throwing away." I said, "What? They didn't want to eat that." He said, "It wasn't long ago, all I had to eat was grass." And so I'm wondering, what is this thing they're talking about, the Holocaust? And no one would tell me. And I saw this story on Anne Frank, and it really brought home to me what this Holocaust was all about. And so if it had an effect with me, who was around people who've gone through the Holocaust, how much more should that affect people today if they really watch stories like this? And I agree with what they say. We can never forget. And unfortunately, human nature shows us that even today, we're beginning to forget. Let this story be a reminder of those times.
I think that we forget that the atrocities of the Holocaust happened less than a century ago. I mean, if you think about it, Anne would be, about 100 years old now, which is not unrealistic that she could possibly still be alive. Her story is so heartbreaking because there's so much hope and so much optimism, and she still believed truly until the end that people are good. And this horrible, horrible thing happened to her, and it allows us to open up a conversation about, you know, a wider topic, which is hatred and violence towards groups of people, which is still happening today across the world, has been happening throughout history. And I think it's our job in this generation to actively work to not sweep these things under the rug and to talk about the messy, terrible things that happened, and in an unfiltered way. So what I love about this piece is it is very much unfiltered. This is a raw portrayal of Anne's story and of what happened to her. And it runs the gamut of all human emotions and really brings this level of humanism and just heartbreak that I think is important for us to feel.